Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Doffenmeyer, I was fascinated by your exchanges with Senator Hoeven at the end of his questioning about the restricting and changing permits in midstream. How do you feel about the fact that 2 weeks ago the Department of Interior canceled the permits for Empire Wind, which took 7 years, cost $2.5 billion. They had fully completed permits, including a lease from the Bureau of Energy Management from 2017. How do you feel about that?
Thank you, Senator King.
Is it okay to pull that permit but not a permit for a pipeline?
No, and I will address your question directly. I did want to just say, because you weren't here at the introduction, my wife and I, our first year of marriage, lived in Maine, and I believe you were the governor at the time, and we absolutely loved it.
Referred to as the golden age.
It was the golden age. It was a honeymoon, a year-long honeymoon. It couldn't have been any better. I am not familiar with the wind project permit or licensing issue that you're describing. I will say, from my standpoint, especially in the private sector, I think the reliance interest of business, the predictability of these permits is something that's very important. I don't know what would have caused this administration to review a permit the way that you described.
It was completed, issued, final record of decision, everything was done. They were ready to, I think they were actually beginning construction.
Okay.
In construction, that was stopped. But so I wish you'd look into that. As a person who's been in the development business, this is the worst nightmare.
Yes.
To go through the process, spend, in my case, millions of dollars, in this case, several billion dollars on permitting, and have a permit pulled after it's issued. That's not a good signal to industry, as I think you will agree.
Yes, I do agree. You know, as the solicitor, I won't be as much of a policymaker as I will be an advisor, but to the extent that I'm, where the lines blur, you're going to have a strong voice in the room in favor of reliability and predictability and durability of these permits, and that, the private sector needs to be able to rely on this in order to attract the capital to build the infrastructure that we need.
Completely agree, and I hope that strong voice will be heard. 14 days, 28 days for an environmental impact statement, that's impossible. That is the Lawyers and Accountants Relief Act of 2025, because that decision will inevitably, as you point out yourself, be appealed, go into litigation, which will take a year or two, come back to the agency. I'm completely committed. I joined the chair and Senator Barrasso, Senator Manchin on permitting reform and time limits, absolutely, but setting time limits that are so unrealistic as to guarantee litigation, it seems to me, is not a productive use of the rulemaking power. You've been in this business. 28 days for an environmental impact statement, that's not serious.
Yeah, well, I share Senator Heinrich's view that, if we're able to comply with this statute within 28 days, then, I will applaud the entire.
And if I can walk across the Potomac River, that'll be good too.
Well, it doesn't seem.
Although the press would say King unable to swim if I did that.
Right. I'm not sure I would agree that it's impossible. It doesn't defy the laws of physics. My view is that it's a very ambitious timeline. I have not been involved in developing that timeline, but I'm very much committed to expediting these permitting timelines as much as we possibly can.
We're all committed to that. I just don't want unrealistic goals that end up lengthening the timeline. Ms. Jazera, are you aware what the cheapest electricity produced in America today is?
For the cheapest?
Cheapest source of electricity in America today.
So when it comes to the cost.
The fact that I'm asking you the question should give you a hint.
Would it be Maine?
It's solar and wind. Cheapest form of electricity today. And would you also agree that renewables plus storage equals baseload?
Senator, thank you for asking about the cost of electricity. It's a complicated question, and there are many
No, it
drivers.
isn't complicated. It's how much what the bus bar cost is of various forms of electricity. There are reports. I get a report every week on what the cost of electricity is from various sources. Wind and solar are consistently the lowest.
So at the Office of Electricity, we look at systems, and so as an engineer, that's what we look at. We look at integrated systems planning, not just resource planning. And so every resource has a certain value that they can provide to the grid, and sometimes there are systems costs, and there's different values that, like compared from firm baseload compared to solar and wind, that you need to make some accommodation for the intermittency that you have.
And I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And right now, battery storage is more expensive and therefore makes the net cost higher. I understand that. On the other hand, I think the important thing is there have been gigantic steps in battery technology over just in the last 5 years. And the point is, wind and solar are intermittent, but when you have storage, whether it's battery or pump storage or whatever else, that's the same as base load because the intermittency problem goes away, correct?
Senator, when we think about the cost of electricity, it's going to depend on the geography, like where you are located, and how does that resource behave there, and it's also going to depend on the load and how that behaves with that. And so it's really going to depend on where you are in the system. And what we're finding is...
Of course, windy places have more wind power and it's a higher capacity factor. I get that. But still, I'll share the data with you. It's pretty clear. Natural gas combined cycle is a little bit higher. Wind and solar are the cheapest. Nuclear is more expensive. I mean, coal is very expensive. And I understand you got to talk about storage too. But the point I want to make is all of the above means all of the above. And it worries me that we're talking strictly about fossil fuel development and not the technologies that will enable us to have a cleaner energy future. Storage is part of it. Solar and wind the price has already dropped so dramatically. One other point, and I'm way over time, is about grid enhancing technologies when you're talking about transmission. I hope that's something you look seriously at so that we're not just overbuilding, and we should take advantage of technologies like reconductoring and the so-called GETs. Do you agree that that's something that should be seriously looked at as we're talking about transmission enhancements?
Senator, the GETs are very important because if we're going to get much more energy out of the system, we need to not just have energy addition, but we can also get more out of the system. And
which
so
will
GETs
save
would
us
offer
huge
that.
costs in transmission development. And that, I think, is something that should be looked at first before we talk about new rights-of-way poles, et cetera.
Senator, I think that we have to look at everything, all the options that are available, because the demand is increasing by so much that we're going to have to look at every option that's on the table. And what is commercially ready? What is most viable over the long term? And so, if confirmed, the Office of Electricity will be looking at, I'll be working to end that research area for advancing conductors, power electronics, microgrids, and various areas to advance the state of the technology.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the indulgence.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize that I've missed most of your testimony. My commitment to you is I'm going back to read